Joe Biden. To deal with the legal ramifications of this, I've asked Rob Garson, who's founder of GS2 Law, an American attorney qualified in New York, Miami, but also a British barrister, to sort of give us a sense of frankly, the monumental nature of this decision. Hi, Rob Garson. I read the judgment because it was illegally leaked. It hasn't changed, it seems to me, dramatically or at all since that leak. One of the things that it seems to me people don't necessarily understand is that Roe versus Wade has always been a controversial judgment. Reading it in draft as I did, what this ostensibly says is, look, it's not for the judiciary to create a right that we say, these six of the judges anyway, doesn't exist. It's for democracy, the democratic process, to do that in whichever state you come from. The consequence, however, is that now 33 million American women don't have access to abortion, and we're now already at 13 states that have outlawed abortion entirely. It is, to say the very least, both a legal and political mess.
Well, that's right. Those trigger laws of those 13 states have now come in to deny the possibility of 36 million women, or 36 million women, of access to what could be abortions in those circumstances. I think this is a great deal of, we're looking at the fractured United States in a moment, but that's always been the fracture. There's been a tension between what would be the Midwestern states, the Bible belts, and also those states that sit around the outside and the peripheries on the coasts, where you've got the blue states versus red states. But we're going to see a massive ramifications when it comes to both law in these circumstances and the legal challenges that are going to come through as a result of this. But also this could have large consequences when it comes to migration and the flow of people around the United States.
Right, and that's certainly possible. There has been a lot of kind of inward exile. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of people leaving, for example, California, going to Texas. Lots of people like you, I think it's fair to say, that internally migrated from New York to Miami during the course of lockdown, and those sorts of policies do have an effect. Can we just go back to first principles? Because I really wanted you on the show to kind of explain them, right? The thing is, there are certain fundamental values in America. Let's talk about the First Amendment, where what effectively the Constitution does is take off the table certain things away from the democratic process. In other words, it says you can't have a vote on my right to free speech. That is unconstitutional. That's protected. A good way of describing it is a bit like Odysseus, right? It says whatever the crazy people, whatever the sirens say, wants our boat to go on the rocks, we're going to put our cheese in our ears and we're going to carry on with our boat going forward. In other words, democracy doesn't always win because there's a constitution which holds certain fundamental values, and those values are written in this document. Now, there are different ideological perspectives of the judges that are on this court, but help us understand, on a legal basis, why and how Roe justified a right to abortion in the first place. Where did it sit in the Constitution, and where has it disappeared to now?
So back in 1973, when Roe versus Wade first came out, and you really got to, the best opinion to look at this is actually the concurrence by Clarence Thomas in relation to this. He writes a very self-congratulatory sort of opinion in these circumstances. It all comes out of, is there a constitutional right to an abortion? When we look at due process rights, does that due process rights, where you have a right to challenge something, does that necessarily grant you fundamental rights to certain other aspects, such as abortion? And that's what Roe versus Wade did. Maybe because of the political climate at the time, it broadened the concept of fundamental rights. And what Clarence Thomas said is no. What that did, that was a perversion of the Constitution. The Constitution grants you a right to due process. That means the right to challenge certain laws and a right to have an ability to challenge certain laws. But that didn't give you certain rights, such as abortion. And his opinion in particular, he's gone wider than the majority opinion by saying, look, anything that has come in under the under the due process clause, as they're calling it, of the Constitution, will now allow us to, we should be allowed to review that, such as
gay marriage, perhaps, Obergefell, so yeah, and so on and so forth. Now, it's not just a monumentous day for overturning what was a constitutionally held right. And by the way, lots of legal analysts, including, I should say, quietly, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was critical of the extent of Roe. Just to be clear, you know, it prevented states from limiting abortion even up to the point of partial birth, which every Western civilized country has limits on that. So it's important to understand the nuances of it. But there was another case called Casey, and that's also important because what that says, and you'll know the Latin expression, which no doubt my listeners will be aware of, stare decisis. What that basically means is, look, once the court has come up with a decision, you may not like it, but you don't overturn precedents because people have reliance interests. In other words, a case has made up its mind. It can't then change its mind unless there's a really overwhelming, compelling interest to do that. They've not just overturned Roe versus Wade in this case, but the case of Casey as well. And that, of course, is very frightening for a variety of other rights, not least when it comes to gay marriage, right?
Correct. So what this allows for, and it's funny, my first aid to English from when I was a kid comes back, the concepts of a critocracy or critarchy, where you have realistically rule by judges. That judges can come in and undermine the democratic process and say, look, this is our view and this is our religious view, because we're not used to in Britain of having judges who are realistically giving or pronouncing judgment on a religious basis. It's thrown us back to biblical times, and it's very bizarre.
Well, it's also about the politicization of the judiciary, which I frankly want to talk about in due course. Now, I'm going to read out a tweet from a mutual friend of ours, Jeremy Breyer QC, who was talking about the British judiciary. He said this: a side point which bears repeating, our judiciary do not have to disclose or be challenged on their politics or approaches to law. They are selected on legal merit by an independent body and give judgment without fear or favour on the law. We must cherish this and never change it. You know, bearing in mind what's happened in America, where these 9 judges, rather than the democratic process, are in effect both to blame for the law and some people would argue creating it, how sacred should we think about the fact that our judiciary are selected at political arm's length?
I think it's one of the best things about the British legal system, honestly. When I first came to the United States and started practicing here, and people said to me, oh, you're very lucky in this case. You've got a democratically appointed judge, or you've got a Republican judge. It was something that was very bizarre, because we in Britain don't know the politics of our judges. And we would hope that Lady Justice is blind, that judges are there in all circumstances to do the right thing and to do justice in those circumstances.
Right.
To have people coming in that have prejudged something because they have prejudices, I suppose, or they've
got political bias, right?
They've got biases.
Yep.
It's nonsensical. It's antithetical, realistically, to the concept that you can come before a court and have your position adjudged by a judge.
Well, as you would say, or as I would say, it does enduring violence to the idea that a court is unbiased and, of course, to the sense that justice is at arm's length. Rob Garson, as ever, it's a privilege to hear from you. It's an extraordinary day in the history of jurisprudence. That's law in America, and whatever your view, boy, is this a day to remember. This is Rob Rinder. You are listening to me on Talk Radio at the home of Talk TV.